Are you ready for a career upgrade? One where you are valued and respected for your expertise, where you get to use your strengths every day, where you're doing work that matters, where you have healthy boundaries, and where you're paid really freaking well. And not only that, but you get to use your privilege to open doors and support others in their pursuit of their own upgraded careers. Well, if that sounds good, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Nicole Case, and after a decades-long career in corporate HR, I'm sharing my behind-the-scenes insider knowledge on how you can upgrade your own career and succeed in this wild corporate world. Each episode will have practical, actionable takeaways that you'll be able to implement right away with some healthy doses of encouragement and maybe a kick in the pants or two. Plus, you'll hear from other amazing women who have upgraded their own careers on their terms. So pour yourself a favorite beverage and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Upgraded Career Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Case. And today we are talking about a topic that I know is so top of mind for a lot of people, particularly as we are going into, summer vacations and things like that. And that is this idea of work-life balance, or rather this myth of work-life balance. Earlier today, I was speaking at an in-person event about upgrading your career and getting to that next level in your career, getting promotions, that kind of thing. And inevitably, I get a question about, how do we go about maintaining this work life balance when we transition into a more demanding role or that next level role? And in our minds, it has to be more demanding. And it just got me thinking, like, I need to come on here and just do a whole podcast episode about specifically this idea of work life balance, or again, rather, this myth of work life balance. I remember I had a client several months ago. She came to me. She was ready to take on her next role, her next challenge, but she was very specific about not wanting to get too high in the organization. She was like, I don't want to get to VP. She's like, I don't want to get that high. She was like, that's too much responsibility. They work all the time. I just see all those people up there at that big level, at that C-suite level. I don't want to do that. And as I dug into it a little bit more with her, I was like, really? Is that the only thing that's holding you back? Is just that you're concerned that your work-life balance is going to get out of whack? And she's like, yeah, otherwise I would do it. And we have to have this conversation around this idea of work life balance, or this is something that we get to control. I get that there are deadlines that other people impose on us and customer escalations and all kinds of crazy things that happen in the working world and in our businesses that we don't always have control over. But we do have control over whether we say, yes, we're going to respond to that quote unquote emergency, or no, we're not going to respond to that right now. I'm going to put a boundary in place around that. I've talked a lot about boundaries before. We have several other episodes out there around these ideas of boundaries. But this idea of having a perfect work life balance all the time, I think, is what keeps us from actually being happy and fulfilled and actually having some resemblance of balance, because we keep fighting this idea that work life balance has to be perfect all the time. So I like to think about this idea of work life balance instead as going with the flow. It's not work life balance. It's not this trying to find that perfect equilibrium all the time, because that in and of itself is not something that we can attain and sustain long term. So I like to think about it as this idea of work life flow, or kind of going with the flow. Now, I'll tell you, this is not something that I just came up with, you know, early in my career and I had it all figured out and I dealt with it all the time in this way. That's totally not true at all. It's only been maybe in the last 2 years or so, working alongside my own coach and working with my therapist around this idea of flow. What I am finding, what I found just in my own career, and especially now in my business, that it's reminding me that business is cyclical. There's going to be peaks and valleys, right? There's going to be really busy times at work. And then there's going to be times where, you're working on the back end on things. or there's going to be really busy times in your personal life, and there's going to be times where things are chugging along really well. And once I finally stopped fighting this idea of perfection around my schedule or this perfection around having this perfect balance in rest versus hustle and all of these things, once I embraced that idea, things have gotten so much easier. And I cannot overstate how much easier this has gone. My husband and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. you know, Earlier this year, the first couple of months of 2023, really full months for me. I was doing a lot of training. I was doing a lot of, getting this podcast up and running and had a lot of new clients coming on board. And things were just super, super full. April came around and it was a little bit quieter. It wasn't intentional in that way. I'd like to say I was super intentional with it, but it wasn't. It just kind of naturally worked out that I only had a couple of speaking engagements. I only had 3 trainings that were lined up and they were all virtual, which definitely cuts down on time around things. And I was like, you know what? April is, not going to be such a full month. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to try to overstuff it just because I have white space. I'm going to just allow the month to unfold how it is. I'm not going to purposely go out there and be like, oh, I've got some extra time. Let me try to drum up some additional business, or let me try to do a bunch of extra stuff or pick up additional training opportunities or anything like that. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to let things unfold naturally because I knew coming up in May, June, and July, things were going to get ramped back up again. So I just kind of allowed myself to ease into that flow of a little bit less of a busy period. And I got some stuff done behind the scenes. I did a bunch of podcast episodes. I rested a lot, which was great, knowing that I was going to ramp it back up in May, June, and July, and that's okay. And then we'll see, the second half of July, my sister comes to visit, so we'll have a little bit of downtime then. And, I'll be able to then get it back into the swing of things in the fall. Just recognizing that again, this whole idea of a balance isn't really real. But what is real is business cycles, is, busy seasons. There are things just in nature. If we think about looking in nature and looking at planting crops or just the growing seasons, like there are seasons when you are tilling the soil, you're working really hard, you're working that soil, you're making decisions about what seeds need to be planted in what soil, what fertilizers you need, how much sun it needs, how much water it needs. Like you're doing all of these things to do the planting in the spring and in the summer. And then you kind of sit back and you let it do its thing. You let it kind of grow. And then you get into a harvest season. And then you're out there like really, picking all of those crops that you just spent all that time in the spring and summer planting and cultivating and nurturing so it would grow. Now you're out there trying to pick it all as quick as you can, at the peak of ripeness. So it's not too ripe, it's underripe. You're doing all that work there. And then you go into a winter season where things are dying off. You till the soil and you let things kind of naturally, go back and get we rest. That's what farmers do in the wintertime. They do a little bit more rest, or maybe they're doing some other projects around the farm or doing some other things, other maintenance things that need to be done in order to prepare for the spring planting season. It's all a cycle, and that's super normal. And for whatever reason, we feel like we have to go, go, go all the time. But then we're also given these signals and these messages that we also should be resting too. So how do we figure out the right formula? And I'm certainly not here to tell you what your formula is for you. I know that when I work with my clients or I'm thinking about myself and I'm talking with my therapist or I'm talking with my coach about kind of where I'm at and what I need, it's just that changes sometimes week to week, month to month about, how I'm feeling and about where my energy levels are, what else is going on in my life. Do I have trips coming up? Do I have vacations coming up? Is there just something stressing me out, just kind of in general, that's causing my energy to feel a little bit low or just have my attention just, a little bit distracted from some other things? And with that, that's when I need to adjust, kind of how much rest that I need and how much kind of go, go, go that I need. Because I will say, I am definitely somebody that likes to go, go, go. I like staying busy. I like having things to do. I like making an impact. There is nothing wrong with that. So if you are out there and you're like, you know what, Nicole, this whole idea of work life balance, this conversation makes me really uncomfortable because I really like to be busy and do a lot of things and have a full calendar. I'm so right there with you. I absolutely love having a full calendar and being out there and visiting with friends and traveling and all this stuff. I actually really, really love that. Too many days for me, too many down days for me, or too many days that I don't have a whole lot structured and going on, I actually get really energy depleted as a result of that. But I've realized over at least the last probably year or so that I can go for about 10 days straight and then I need like 2 days rest. And then I can go another 10 days and then I need 2 days rest. And now that I'm headed into just kind of a really full season, I'm taking on a bunch of new clients right now and I have a lot more training that I'm going to be doing and traveling for, that I just, okay, now I need to be just really intentional and making sure I am baking in those periods of rest, time to binge watch a TV show with my husband or just going and sitting by the pool for a while. I know I'm going to need some of those things. So as someone who is just naturally inclined to be a go, go, go person, I know that I need to just be more intentional about baking those things in. And then who knows, maybe in a couple months again, I'll have a couple weeks breather where I don't have a whole lot scheduled and I will ease into that flow as well. So, what are some strategies for you to just kind of figure out what this whole quote work life balance or flow looks like in your own life? Well, one, I'll just say that most of us out here, again, are not saving lives. Most of us are listening to this podcast. If you are out here saving lives, I applaud you. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing for everyone else out here saving our lives. But I can tell you that unless you're a first responder, a doctor, a surgeon, a nurse, someone out here that is, again, truly physically saving lives and recognizing that urgency, we can probably take us down, right? We can probably just take it down just a moment. That email can probably wait for tomorrow. That phone call can probably wait until next week. Let's just not take ourselves so seriously for a moment, right? Let's just take it on down a bit. And then we just really need to sit down and really just reflect on what's going on in our lives. Are you in a season where you've got, babies at home and like little kids at home and they really, really need you in terms of survival and safety and all of those things? And that's where a lot of your attention is. Maybe you've got kids kind of that are older elementary, middle school, high school. Got a lot of friends that are in that season right now. And I'll tell you, they're at the ballpark all nights and weekends. There are the travel teams, they're back and forth and traveling with their kids doing sports. That's just the season that they're in. And I can tell you that they are not able to do girls' nights as often. They're not able to just go out and have dinner or grab drinks or anything like that like they used to. And that's okay. That's just the season that they're in. That season will pass and we'll circle back, right? It'll be okay. And then I've got other friends and colleagues who are just super heads down in their business, or super heads down in their careers, and they're really driving towards that next level. And that's really where a lot of their focus is. They're going to networking events, they're going to conferences. They are just, again, really, reading lots of business books. And those are a lot of the conversations that we're having whenever we get together. That's the season that they're in, and that's okay. Again, that'll probably shift and change over time. But what we have to do right now is sit down and just really recognize, where am I at in my career? What are the things that are important to me? And how do I make sure those get prioritized? So for me, for example, I'm not someone who has children that I have to I'm not navigating that type of those seasonalities of life, but I am navigating, seasonalities in my business, just, where I'm at with my age and my health and just other priorities that I have in my life. And I've sat down and I've said, you know what? Working out, moving my body in the mornings are really important to me. I have found over time that working out at night in the afternoon really doesn't feel as good for me. It just doesn't work for me. So I prefer to work out in the mornings. Okay. So how do I make that happen? 2, 3, 4 days a week that I'm making sure that I'm getting some type of movement in my day, it first thing in the morning. What needs to happen in order to enable that, right? If you are someone who it's important for you to make sure you are home to get your kid off the bus, what needs to happen in your career, in your business, or just other places in your life to make sure that that happens. But we have to first sit down and identify those kind of non negotiables, super high priority items, and make sure those get scheduled on the calendar first. So if date night with your partner on Saturday night is really important to you, you got to bake that in. I have a girlfriend of mine. It's important for us to get together and have lunch at least once a month. So what do? We schedule it. We have a recurring meeting invite on both of our calendars, actually for every other week, because it typically needs to get moved or needs to get pushed. And we know that at least one of them will probably work out. It'll probably happen, but we have to calendar them. It's important to us to stay connected and to sit down and have a nice long lunch on a Friday where we can have a glass of wine and just not feel like we're rushing. So we calendar it. We've made that a priority in our relationship and in our lives. So we've calendared it, and everything else gets scheduled around. So again, sit down and figure out what are some of these non-negotiables that are in your life right now that we need to make sure are accounted for. And then we can bake everything else around. We also need to look at just our jobs and even in our personal life too. Just what are those tasks that need to be done 100%, 110%? And then what are those tasks that really only need maybe 80%, right? Not all tasks are created equal. Not all tasks require 110% of you. I know this might feel blasphemous for some of you out here. I recognize that being a highly driven, highly ambitious, just focused on excellence sort of performer like you are, this can feel really difficult to back off on this a little bit. I was talking with a woman this morning at this in person event, and she was just telling me about, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not a perfectionist, but and then she goes on to say, "But I just want things to be done really well, and I want things to be done on time and all of these things." And I totally get that and I respect that. And we should still be showing up and doing high quality work and showing up in the way that we want to show up. But again, not every task requires 110%. So, for instance, if I'm downstairs folding laundry, I've got towels in the dryer right now. So, right after I'm done recording this episode, I'm going to go fold those towels. I do not need to make really fancy, like, towel animals out of my towels or fold them in a really fancy way, right? With all of these really crisp corners and things like that. That is what the lovely people at hotels do and resorts do. That's what those folks do. I don't necessarily need to have super, super fancy folded towels. Do I fold my towels in a particular way? Absolutely, I do. Do I fold them in, the same way every single time? Have I figured that out how they look best and fit best into the cabinet in the bathrooms? Absolutely, I have. But I've also not gone so far to be like, oh yeah, I need to create a little towel elephant every single time we have guests come over to the house and I prop it up on the bed or something like that for them. Again, if that was the type of experience they wanted, they can go to a hotel, right? So that's like an 80% task. The towels are clean, the towels are dry, the towels are folded in a nice, neat, consistent way, and it looks aesthetically pleasing in the bathroom counter. But otherwise, I'm not taking it to that next level, right? Same thing in your job or in your business. And one thing that kind of comes to mind for me there is like PowerPoint presentations. Like, and again, this is totally going to depend on your role. So I'm just throwing this out here as an example. But do your PowerPoint presentations all need to have really fancy colors and fonts and animations and transitions and, you know, all of these really extra things? Like, is that really necessary in your role? It might be. Now, don't get me wrong. It might be. You might be in a marketing role or in a role that that makes sense for you to spend that 110% effort on that particular task. But I guess probably for the vast majority of the rest of us out here, our clean, crisp, clear, concise PowerPoint slides that doesn't have a bunch of distracting transitions and whiz bang things going on, is probably okay. That's probably an 80% task, right? What I personally would rather spend more time on when I'm out there presenting to groups is, again, having very crisp and clean slides that aren't distracting, that add to the talk, that add to the experience. But there's actually not a whole lot on my slides. And one of the reasons is because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. I really don't. I just don't have the patience and the skill and the bandwidth to spend a ton of time on my slides. Now, maybe someday I could hire somebody to help me with that, perhaps, but I'd rather spend my time and effort on ensuring that my actual presentation skills and my communicating the message that I'm trying to get across really lands with my audience. So I'm going to spend more time practicing my talk, making sure the talk is, customized appropriately for that particular audience. That's where I'm going to spend the 110% effort versus the 80% effort of pulling together some really simple but effective PowerPoint slides. Again, just as an example. But once again, your not every task requires 110% of your effort. And I think that if you go through, what does my day to day look like? What are the various tasks that I'm working on? What meetings am I in? Can I notch that meeting back from an hour to 30 minutes? Does it really need a whole hour? Does this even need a meeting at all? Can we spend a little bit of time creating a template of some sort and then just have people send their updates that way? Or are there, again, just certain tasks that maybe you shouldn't be doing anymore? What I often find with people who have just recently got a big promotion, the big promotion's scary, right? It's this new role. We have to figure out this new learning curve, right? And just what it looks like to be at this next level, that sometimes people will slide back into old habits or old tasks that they were familiar with, that they were comfortable with, that they knew that they could do really well. And that's doing is that is taking them away from those higher level tasks or those more strategic tasks that they should be focused on at this new next level. This is actually what I see really trip people up in their new roles once they get promoted, is that they get pegged as someone who's not very strategic, who's not moving the needle, who's not being as effective as they could be in this new role as quickly as they could, because they're still so focused on previous things that they've done in, in lower level positions that they were in. And this is true whether they got promoted internally or they've gone external to a new company. Again, it's scary. So it can make some sense, right? Why someone might find comfort in doing some tasks they previously did. But if you are able to like really recognize, okay, these aren't the things that I need to be focused on anymore. I need to either delete, delay, or delegate those to someone else. That is going to free you up to have more weight space, to free you up to feel like, okay, I can breathe a little bit and I'm finding a little bit more balance or flow or waves or whatever word you want to use with it. And then the final thing that I will say here is that you are not going to be successful at this next level if you are not prioritizing your own mental and physical health. You're just not, right? I've seen, again, so many people, get to that next level or strive to get to that next level, and they end up burning themselves out along the way. And you're not going to be able to perform at that peak level like you're capable of and that you want to perform at. We want to perform at our top level, right? But we're not going to be able to do that if we are not also prioritizing our mental and physical health. And if we look at athletes, athletes are a really great example of this. So athletes have off season. They have bye weeks when they're not playing in a particular week or a couple of weeks, right? And then whenever they do have practice during the season, they're often not practicing full on out in the middle of the season because they need to preserve their energy for game days. And I don't know what your opinions are necessarily about Tom Brady, but I'll tell you, I'm originally from north of Pittsburgh, so it's a requirement there to just hate Tom Brady. But you have to respect what he has done, in football, right? Over his career. He has been one of the most highly decorated quarterbacks and just football players of all time. And he has been playing well into his 40s. The vast majority of quarterbacks do not play that long. The vast majority of any athlete, regardless of what sport, typically does not play at that level for that long. So you have to wonder, what is Tom Brady doing differently? And he'll tell you, if you ever listen to podcasts or interviews that he does, he always is referencing, his workout routines, his resting, his meditation, yoga that he does, and also just fueling his body with foods that not only taste good, but also just work well for what he's trying to do, right? So we also have to think of ourselves a little bit in this way too, that I'm going to have off seasons. I can be at practice and I can continue to be putting in effort, but it doesn't have to be at 110%. I want to save that for game days. And when on the days that I'm not practicing or the days that I'm not actually performing, I need to make sure that I'm resting to give my muscles and to give my body time to recoup from all of that work that we just did. So again, this whole idea of work-life balance, I actually really hate this idea. I don't even like calling it work-life balance. A, it's overused, and B, it's just not realistic because it again is sending us, particularly as women, this message that we need to be all things to everyone. We need to be, crushing it in our jobs, crushing it with our friends, crushing it with our health and with our families all over the place. And it's really hard to find that sustainable balance. So I offer to you to lean into and embrace what I like to call waves or just life flow. Because the more we battle it, the more we resist it, more we fight back against it, the more it's going to continue to cause us angst and anxiety and overwhelm. Let's all just agree here today and agree here now that we are going to embrace the natural flows in our life and in our business and just ride those waves. That's what we're going to do. So, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and listening to my rant about my dislike of the phrase work life balance and this idea of having to keep it consistent and perfect for all time, because that's just not realistic. So, again, thank you so much. Head on over to my website at NicoleCasespeaks.com/newsletter if you like to see more of this type of information in your email box every single week. I'd love to have you on that list, and make sure you say hi as soon as you get signed up so I can shout you out. So thank you so much for joining me today. Come on back here. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week. But in the meantime, remember, your career deserves an upgrade.